Good afternoon and welcome everybody. I'm Sylvia from EHE Climate Kick and I'm happy to be here today with all of you to host this innovation practice group on land use and food system. I hope that my screen is appearing now on your side. Today we're going to have like an interesting session with two amazing speakers that are with us today. And to kickstart, I would like just to give you an overview of today's agenda. We're going to start with a quick welcome and introduction, explaining you what innovation practice groups are, for those that are not familiar with that. We're going to then move to a mirror board for a quick check-in, just to familiarize a little bit with who is in the room today. And then we're going to enter in the core of today's session, where we're going to have two presentations on fable and landscape. The presentation are going to be followed by a Q&A session with our speakers, and then you're going to have the opportunity to decide to who would you like to explore a bit farther, like the presentation of today. And this is going to happen within the breakout rooms part. At the very end, we're going to ask you to give us a feedback just to understand if you have appreciated the session of today from the interactive perspective, the speakers, and the presentation as well. And then we're going to give you a bit more of clear information of what are the next steps for the Innovation Practice Group. So what are the Innovation Practice Group? Innovative Practice Group are part of a program called Pathway to Resilience, where we are actually working right now with 39 amazing European regions that are sitting with us to develop their to follow their regional resilience journey and working with us on many different activities with the aim of preparing their own climate adaptation plan and the investment plan as well. Innovation Practice Group are sitting within this program, and in particular, those are learning and knowledge sharing group, where we would like to have all of you as expert practitioners and regions or communities to meet together and guided by what are your challenges and needs, we would like to create this group of knowledge exchange. Innovation Practice Group are driven by four main pillars. One is that those represent the place to showcase best practices, so to highlight what are successful existing solutions that you are implemented in your location. The second is about having the opportunity to share experience, to exchange knowledge on enabling conditions and systems, which are all the different thematic areas that we're covering with the Innovation Practice Group. The third point is about to develop plans and ideas, so to kind of co-create together in the room new plan and new idea about adaptation, in this case on landscape and food system. And the last part is to have a broader perspective, so to gain like a wider and regional understanding of what are the different challenges that at European level we're facing. The key objectives are three. The first is to connect the region with the sources of knowledge and expertise, and that's why we do have experts coming into the room. The second one is to connect the regions with the regions, so to have this kind of community creation on innovative adaptation practitioner across Europe. And the last point is to provide additional knowledge exchange opportunities to those regions that are working with us in Pathway to Resilience. The Innovation Practice Group timeline, it's a little bit longer. Now we are just starting with today, where we're sitting with the Innovation Practice Group week 1 that started this Monday. But what we're doing here today comes from what we have been working with our regions a few months ago in October 24, where during the kickoff of P2R, we had the opportunity to discuss with the region selected to understand what are the challenges and the needs that they have identified for land use and food system at the regional level. And starting from those challenges and needs, we have started to plan the session that we are delivering this week and also like in the future, calling in experts and calling in regions that would like to share their own case study and practices. We're going to have like a few more sessions before the end of the year. A second session is going to be during the IPGs week 2, happening from the 2nd to the 8th, I think, of June. And then, or 6th, sorry, I'm not really good like within all those numbers and all those dates. And the third IPGs week is going to start on the 22nd of September. This is not going to be the end of the innovation practice groups. What we're trying to do, as I said, is to create this community of practices, somehow focusing on different thematic areas. So the idea is to keep working on that even next year, where we're going to have a new cohort of region joining us in Path to Resilience, but also for future and beyond Path to Resilience itself. Having said that, I would like to introduce you to the place where we're going to collect all our input, all our ideas, and all our resources as well, which is Miro. For those of you that are not familiar with Miro board, don't worry, we're going to guide you through that. We have set up this Miro board just because in this way we'll have the possibility to collect all the input from the discussion, but also all the material that can be shared. The Miro board is going to be available for you even after the session and throughout the entire year. You will have the opportunity to call back. So just save the link that we're going to share in the chat to make sure that you're going to have access to everything. And it's divided in 3 main parts. So the top part is where we do have the Innovation Practice Group with week's calendar, where you can already find all the link to register to the IPGs session of this week. And you have already save the date for the week 2 starting from the 2nd of June. The central part represents the session content. So it's where we're going to share with you the PowerPoint from the presentation of today, is where we're gonna use the space to interact a bit more among us. And then the last part, the wall of resources, is a place for you to share with all your peers tools, templates, report, scientific paper, case study that you might find relevant for this specific topic, which is land use and food system. Having said that, I would like to invite you all to join me on Miro. So I'm gonna quickly stop sharing my screen. And I know that in the chat, you already have the link to the Miro board. So I kindly ask you to please click on it. For those on the phone that cannot join us through Miro, don't worry, we're going to give you instruction to how to use Zoom chat to give your input. And once you're on Miro, I see that number here increasing, so I'm going to wait a few more seconds to bring everybody where I am. Okay, so let me bring you all here. So normally now Miro redirected you where I am. And what we would like to do is a quick check-in to understand who is in the room, where are you from, with who are you working at the moment. So the check-in is quite simple. We have 3 steps. The first one is to zoom here, and you can select one post-it to represent your profile. So if you're more a policy and advocacy, if you're working on social activities and technical, researcher, finance, or other. And as people are start doing, to bring your post-it, type your name and type your organization where you are working or who you represent. And then to move your post-it in the place around Europe, where are you currently located? So we're going to see how people are based here and there. And if you're not based in Europe, please feel free to go behind the box here and put your post-it somewhere else. You also have the possibility to bring one post-it and put it bigger or smaller, so to reduce the size if you want, and to move it around. And if there's no color that represents you, just go on the left side. There's something called sticky note, and you can grab another color that are not specifically one of those. I'm gonna give you a few minutes for that. We can see that we have a few researchers that are joining us today, someone working on policy and advocacy, other as myself that are focusing on other things, let's say in general. We have someone a bit more technical here, Croatia, or Slovenia, sorry. Let's wait a few more minutes for that. And as I said, if you're connected with your phone and you cannot put your post-it, just feel free to type in the chat what is your organization that you're working with, And if you have any particular color coded where you're based, so we're going to create the post-it for you and move it around the map. Good. Having said that, let me go back to the slides. I hope you can see now the slide again. Yes, great. So just make sure to familiarize a little bit with the use of post-it. And in the meanwhile, I'm happy to move to the next part of today's session, which is the introduction of land use and food system. And I'm happy to pass the floor to my colleague Lorraine, which is here with us today to facilitate the session.
Thank you, Sylvia, and good afternoon, everyone. My name is Lorraine. I work for Climate Kick. And together with my colleague Oscar Higuera from IASA, we are advising the Innovation Practice Group on this theme of land use and food systems. So I just wanted to say a few words today about why we are talking about this, why it's important in the context of resilience. When we talk about land use, we talk about many things. Land use and food systems, it's a very broad topic. And the way land is used is a key factor in for the resilience of a territory in a context of a changing climate. So some of you may have already taken part in the kickoff introductory session that Sylvia mentioned. In that session, there were several topics of interest that were discussed. Of course, when we talk about land use, we can talk, well, the immediate thing that comes to mind is the countryside, rural areas, the forest, agriculture, but we can also talk about urban land use, artificialized land, land that is dedicated to industry, etc. So this is a topic where we will talk about, for example, how bioeconomy can be sustained and developed in the context of a changing climate to make territories more resilient. We can talk about how to engage farmers in an adaptation strategy on a territory. We can talk about how forests can be managed also as Daniel will talk about, at the interaction between value chain and landscape approaches. We can talk about how to develop resilient, sustainable food production strategies in a territory. So that being said, we wanted to have a first session covering two interesting and complementary topics with two distinguished speakers, Katia Perez Guzman of IASA, who is going to talk about the Fable tool, and Daniel Zimmer of Climate Kick, who is going to talk about landscape and value chain approaches with an example on forest and wood. With this, I give back the floor to Sylvia. Thank you all.
Thanks, Ren. Thank you so much. Yeah, as Ren mentioned, Oscar from IASA is also here with us today to support the facilitation. So you're going to have the opportunity to meet with both Lauren and Oscar when we're going to come to the breakout session. Having said that, I think we're ready to start. Katya, I'm going to stop sharing my screen and I will give the floor to you. And welcome.
Okay, thank you very much, Sylvia. Can you hear me okay?
Perfectly.
Okay. I will start also sharing my screen. And presentation. Okay. Thank you very much, Sylvia, Lorraine, and everybody for the opportunity to present the work that we create in IASA in terms of the transformation of land use and food systems, which is the IPG topic of today. So I will do my presentation in about 20 minutes, but I'm definitely more interested on hearing about you, about what are your interests, and if there's a possibility that we can collaborate about your interests and needs with the tools that we elaborate in IASA. So look forward to hearing your questions. Okay, to put the context on what Fable is, I will go one step back to, as Lorraine already mentioned before, to envision what problems we're talking about, or what are the topics that we talk about when we talk about the transformation or the sustainable transformation of food systems. So I want you guys to think about your regions that you represent today, and of everything that entails food systems and agriculture. Just think about one specific part of it and one policy. And then we will envision how that relates to our tool. Okay, so from all of the different regions that we belong, definitely we have a lot of common aspects. All of us have some agriculture on it. These are some pictures about the things that we see in everyday life. And this agriculture has different aspects to it. So it has a consumption aspect, the food that we eat, and it has a production aspect. All of this usually relates to the policies that we're in contact with. Some of you might have thought about a policy related to maybe agricultural production. As Lauren mentioned, this is usually what we think of when we think of food systems, how farmers are doing in a region, which is super important. And relating to farmers, there's many policies that we already know, right? For example, how to increase our productivity, how to best use fertilizers, and so on. All our regions, all our countries, my country, I come from Mexico, we already have a very good expertise in terms of policy and practices about what agriculture is doing right now in terms of production and how it would do from now until 2050. Of course, there's a lot of things to improve, but I think that we can make sure that it's already going well for us, right? On the other hand, other aspects of food systems, for example, consumption of food systems, which food we eat and how it affects us, also have their own policies of food security, of obesity that some foods can cause, or undernutrition in some other countries. But this is not it, right? What we know now about the transformation of food systems to the future is that it's actually not just about a policy or a sector. It's more about the interrelationship between different sectors, particularly. So you may think, okay, aside from agriculture, what other sectors could be involved? Well, for sure, we saw in Lauren's pictures, and we kind of see right here, the other ecosystems that are around agriculture, which always is the case, especially in Europe. You don't see a farm when it's not next to a forest, for example, or another type of more natural ecosystem. And these ecosystems also have their own policies, right? So in my country, the Natural Resource Secretariat would take care that the soil of the forests is well maintained, or that the plag of the trees are not being very invasive, and so on. And more recently, more policies were associated to this, especially in terms of sustainability, for example, climate change and biodiversity. So from the policies that you guys thought in the beginning of this presentation and the ones I mentioned, we are very straightforward on which policies these are and which actors they have. But what may be harder for us to think is how these different parts of the food systems actually interact with each other. So are the agricultural people talking to the natural resource sector? Do the biodiversity people take into account the activities that are done in terms of fertilizers, for example? Of course, there are, and I'm sure there's plenty of good examples of that. But is that realized in a systematic way? And more specific for the objective of today's session is, do we have the proper tools for this intersectoral coordination so that it happens systematically, but also not just talking about things and how things should be done, but actually very objectively and quantitatively? That's the question that we will answer in our session. And the good news in terms of what we do in YASA and Fable is that we want to provide these tools that can help support this more objective dialogue between sectors. So that's it. That was the spoiler of what I'm going to present today. This is what Fable is about. I represent the Fable project that has been created already for some years in YASA. And as I have introduced, what the Fable Consortium aims is to look at the food systems and land use and other sustainability indicators not in isolation, but as a system. So try to capture the whole system in one tool, so that then we can talk about the transformation of food systems in the long term, in the future, in a systemic way. So what is FABLE? FABLE, of course, as a very first part, it's a word, it's an acronym, which has these 5 systems included in them. So food security, agriculture, biodiversity, land use, and energy, as in bioenergy. But it's also a consortium. So we have already had several years of conforming different FABLE teams in different countries along the world since 2017, who get together with the objective of thinking about these topics in this systematic way, but not just that, doing in this very quantitative, objective way, and do it together. So also not think about these policies at the country level, at the national level where we are right now, but actually begin to have this discussion of how this may affect global targets, for example, Sustainable Development Goals and the Paris Agreement. And the big question that we want to answer is, how can our local activities, our national policies, can get the best in terms of a systemic view, but also make sure that we make this transformation of food systems into the future in a sustainable way. So this is our main objective of these 24 teams. And the way we do this is open. Of course, we don't mean to impose any method. And if there is other methods out there that you guys may already know as well on how to do this, please let us know. This is meant to be more of a community of practice, that we have the common objective. But we are aware that even though there may be many tools, particularly YASA, where I come from, has a lot of these economic equilibrium models that aim to foresee transition in sectors as the agricultural sector in the future in a very, very specific way. But these models are expensive. They are very intensive in terms of people with the right computing skills to be able to actually say something about any sector, which is important. But for the rest of the sectors and of the countries who do not have these tools or models, it's sometimes hard to talk about these problems quantitatively. So what we what we brought to the table is also what we call the FABLE calculator, which is an Excel file. And it's meant to be this free and open access integrated model, as in integrated as a system that can help us capture this picture of the food systems in a country at the national level and its transformation, assuming several things. For example, that agriculture is a primary driver, that we want to see this change from 2000 to 2050 in 5 years steps. And particularly right now that we can focus at the national level. I know that several of you represent subnational regions, and this is our next step in the FABLE calculator, which we're already doing. For Mexico, we're trying to not understand only the reality of food systems at the national level, but bring it down to some subnational entities. So if you're interested in this, then definitely let us talk. And that's pretty much it. The FABLE consortium uses tools, including the FABLE calculator, to try to capture this picture of the food system. So what is this picture? What is it made of? For sure, there's many ways to think about a system of food and agriculture and sustainability. We focus on one of them, which is the economic system. So we capture in an Excel file the economic equilibrium of agricultural products in terms of consumption and production in different parts of the economy, as many products as we can, so that it reflects the reality of that country. So we have up to 83 products. It can be crops, it can be processed crops, and livestock products. So really encompassing all of the agricultural and animal sector at different levels of production and with different production systems. And the basic exercise that one can do if one is interested in foreseeing, in forecasting, in having the scenarios of how the food system of a country will look like is once this economic reality or economic equilibrium of the country is settled in this Excel file, then one can start playing around with it, right? So it's kind of like, okay, if my country is behaving right now in this way, but I move this little part, how is that going to affect biodiversity? How many emissions are going to be resulting of this? How is the land use of my country going to change because of this change? So these small little changes that we can do of the model very easily. So the idea of the model is that it's also very straightforward. Is called scenarios. That is the inputs of the model. We have many scenarios that aim to capture most of the drivers of our food systems that will be key for the transformation in the future. For example, we can talk of in Europe about food waste. So Europe might have an important problem of food waste that we want to quantify in terms of, okay, if we have right now some 20% of food waste in consumption and 30% in post-harvest loss in my country, and we want to see what a policy could do of decreasing that by half, what effect would that have in the rest of the system that we are taking into account in FEBO? So then we set that scenario and we make sure that the other scenarios reflect reality as best as we can, and then see the results of the model. So these are the rest of the scenarios we have. If you're interested in talking about some of these more specifically, of course we can. I understand we are talking here about more like about adaptation of climate change of ecosystems. So maybe some scenarios may not be so relevant for that, but some of them might be more. For example, agroecological practice definitely is one of the scenarios that is more relevant for Europe in terms of organic agriculture, and that's included in the model. And once we make these little changes, what we want to see is how the system in the future how it will look like. Not necessarily predicting, but imagining future scenarios, imagining futures. The key outputs that we have is food security. So the calorie consumption per capita per person for the country, the greenhouse emissions in terms of different sectors and different gases, the land use change in terms of which are the inertias of different land use changes and how they trade off one on top of another. Biodiversity, as mentioned, and related to agroecological practices as well. And one of the spirits of this community of practices FABLE is that if anything else is of interest to our member countries, which could be you. For example, if you have something that you say, oh, this is a tool that we can use and we would like to see how it could work in this exploration of land and food systems, but it's not included in the Excel file, then we create groups that can include it in the Excel file, which implies a little bit understanding first how it is to see how we can begin to tinker with it. So we are a very, very ongoing, alive community of practice that aims to have a better model for everybody's needs. So one of the last models that were added were nitrogen and phosphorus in agriculture and costs in terms of factors of production, so fertilizers, machinery, and employment in the agricultural sector. Okay, so we are almost in the last part of the presentation. This is pretty much what FABLE is in a general way. Part of my job as Katia Perez from Mexico is to make sure that this FABLE model is used. I am interested not so much about models that stay in somebody's desks, you know, and give people status and ego with a lot of publications. I'm interested that models are actually useful for policies and for planning. And in Latin America, this is very important because a lot of these models are actually not existing there. So what I do is a lot of capacity building. Whenever somebody's interested in learning how the FABLE calculator works, this is where I definitely can help. We're not going to go into detail right now because I don't want to get you dizzy about so many numbers, but just so you know that we have advanced a lot in helping people understand how the model is so that it can be useful for you, for your own purposes. So what are the results that we have had? We have already done several global exercises with the national models coming together into when they reflect their own reality, but they then also aim at some global targets. One of them is in Europe. So there's already several calculators in Europe. For example, Germany, Norway, Sweden, and UK were among the first countries who joined us. So they have a Fable team, and they already went through several iterations of the Fable model for their own purposes. More recently, Denmark and Ireland joined, and the question is if your country would be interested in joining and is not here, definitely get in touch with Oscar and us to add an additional Fable team. And we have also done several regional exercises. So this is an example of a regional exercise for Europe that was done in 2023, commissioned by the European Economic Social Committee, to try to figure out how this transformation of food systems into the future could look like for Europe in terms of the global targets called Sustainable Development Goals, particularly number 2 of Zero Hunger. This is the report. I put the link here below so you can take a look at it and see a little bit what can get out of Fable in terms of national level models and global targets. Okay, last part of the presentation is I will tell you a little bit more of the detail of how I am using the model right now as we speak, just so you can get more of a feeling about it. And hopefully this will get you to those right questions that we want to discuss later. So this is an example of how I'm using the calculator right now to help an NGO in the Dominican Republic who was interested about this model to envision the transformation of food systems for the Dominican Republic. For them, the interest is food security for sure, productivity of coffee and cacao, which are their main exports, and reforestation, because they have had different policies in of reforestation in the past, and they want to foresee an increase of reforestation in the future. So basically, what we do in the model is we set these numbers right as much as possible with the data that we already have in the model established. For example, population, diets, food loss was also important for them. Definitely exports and productivity of the key crops that they wanted to explore for the future. Making sure that other things, for example, like land expansion, how it has been historically and how it's expected to be in the future, is also inputted correctly. But definitely focusing more on what is their desire to see. So what they wanted to ask is, if we compare the current trends of Dominican Republic in terms of reforestation, which is a program called Quisqueya Verde for the past, and no changes in protected area. So if we compare that with the national policies that are now being implemented, which, for example, for diets, they have some new dietary guidelines, new scenarios for exports and productivity of the key goods, but particularly the 30 by 30 global targets of reforestation of the Biodiversity Convention implemented at the national level and including national climate actions of coffee and cacao. So the question for them would be like, what would that mean for the country? Can we actually do that? Is it feasible, taking into account the whole system? So we are in the process of making sure the model is fitting to the reality of Dominican Republic, and that includes these policies that they're interested in exploring. I can show you some of the results that we're already getting, just to give you an idea of what one can see with the Fable model. So remembering that Fable is this acronym, right? So first, food security. For Dominican Republic, it's important to guarantee that all of their people are eating enough and in terms of nutrients properly. So good protein and good fat. We see that in terms of food security, Dominican Republic in the beginning was not so good. So this is the dotted red line where below it's food insecurity and above is food security. In the beginning, not so good, but they managed to catch up, let's say, until 2050. But there is a difference between the current trends and the policies that we implemented. And the difference is less food security. So policies implemented in one place, which is reforestation and increase of natural protected areas, can have a detrimental effect of a trade-off of land use, which could affect food security. We're not predicting, we're just exploring how the future could look like. This we see clearly in the comparison of land use. Land use that doesn't change that much without these policies changes drastically. Of course, if we want to make some afforestation or reforestation, because of how the country land change has happened in the past, that means that the only possibility, at least that the model gives us, is a trade-off with pastures particularly, which explains a little bit the decrease in food security due to protein decrease. And this also has an impact in emissions. The first profile of greenhouse gas emissions is mostly due to the livestock sector. So the livestock sector was definitely one of the most important emitters historically for the Dominican Republic. This continues to be the case in the second exploration, but with some afforestation, some more carbon sequestration. And we can see these emissions by sector and by gas. We can also see the carbon sequestration by why it happened, if it happened due to land use change or other dynamics inside of the model. And all of this gives us the AFOLU emissions, which is important. As you may know, this is still the challenge that we have in our sustainability global policy, that we have already accounted very nicely for energy emissions and policies, but the food and land use sector is still missing a lot of this exploration. So our model helps to do these explorations more quantitatively and objectively. Okay, so the last slide is summarizing these results for the Dominican Republic. There's more results, but these are the most important for them right now. So food security, particularly SDG 2 and 3, can be met for 2050, but proteins is still a problem. So we will need to explore the model a little bit more to see how we can both get good protein content inside of the country, so produce good protein content, while also keeping in mind the other targets that we want to achieve. Land use change, we saw a little bit the graph, and that means that we can have a policy of reforestation, but it is a trade-off, and we will have to see then what is the best trade-off of productive land and afforestation. Greenhouse gas emissions, in total, they have a target in the nationally determined contribution for the IPCC of sequestration of AFOLU of 2 million tons of CO2 equivalent. And our exercise shows that this can be done, at least with the policies that we mentioned. But again, we need to revise them. And next is to use the agroecological model, which is more complex in different practices and the implications of different practices. For example, organic farming in different aspects of the model, for example, productivity of key crops and greenhouse gas sequestration and biodiversity. So this is what we're working on. Okay, thank you very much for your attention. I look forward to hearing your questions and discussion. If you're interested in Fable, particularly maybe more relevant for you is to use to leverage the needs that you may have for your regions and the expertise that you may have for these problems as a case study for national calculator. Definitely let's start. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Katia. Thank you for the nice presentation. Interested to know more about this tool, about Fable tool that has been applied not only in Europe, but also in other contexts, and to understand the implications of policies related to land use and agriculture. What is more exciting is to see that it's very easy to apply from what I understood. It's like different from other models, which highly data-driven and computing skills. Yeah, and also very interesting to see that you're looking for ways to apply it at the lower governance levels. So I would like to open the floor to participants if someone has questions for Katia. So feel free to raise your hand or jump in directly. We'll check quickly the chat. Get the link. I can maybe I have a very short question to you that could be the interest for the participants. is what would be necessary to be a candidate for a subnational or regional pilot case? How will be the procedure or request to the Fable Consortium? How does it work?
Yes, thank you, Oscar. I added the links to the Fable Consortium and the calculator in the chat. So the first step is if you would be interested to be a Fable team, where there is not a Fable team already, the first link of the Fable Consortium has a page of join us, please. So it's a matter of sending a mail, just saying the requisites, which is, we're interested and we're willing to put the time. And then you will get a response. It may be not so fast, but eventually the team will happen. It's really just a matter of time. Right now, the model, I also put the link where you can download this generalized model. It's at the national level. Making it at the national level is very challenging because it just adds the complexity, but it needs to be done because this is where a lot of the problems in the food systems are. So right now, this is a kind of like a beta version of the calculator that is being done for Mexico, because the person from Mexico is super interested in this. So if you guys have time and resources and are super interested on being also part of this development, let's say, of the Excel file for the subnational level, also get in touch with me or the Fable Consortium and let them know that you would like to be part of this. And that's pretty much it.
Okay, great. I think we have a question from Jan.
Yes. Oh, thank you very much for the presentation. I found it very interesting because it shows the trade-offs between different land uses and the impacts they can have on either the food production, like, and many different things. I'm working for a region in France, and we have a goal for 2050 that there will be zero net artificialization. And I was wondering how such model could be used to imagine the different ways to reach this objective, the trade-offs this can involve, and also up to which point we could possibly in the future go below this regional subnational level, but go even further to maybe more local community level, because we are working with them and they will ask us what are the implications for them. Thank you.
Yes, super good questions, Jan. You were saying zero net artificialization?
Yes, I'm not sure it's a good translation of the French way of saying it, but the idea is that by 2050, we won't be able to artificialize more lands in France. Well, in a net calculus. So yeah.
Okay. I'm not sure what that is, and that's why I needed to know a little bit more context. So at least for sure, the model has a lot of possible uses, and one of the uses that is really, really good at is exactly what you mentioned, Jan, about if you have a target that can be measured by the model and you're curious about the trade-offs and the implications that this target will have in different systems and in different sustainability indicators, that's exactly what is made. So definitely the Fable model is an option for you. The only question that I will have is if this target, particularly zero net artificialization, is actually right now already included in how the economic is modeled. It's more a technical question, so it's a matter of sitting down and finding that out. So yeah, let's talk about it. And of course, the relevance of these models are more at the local level. So I agree with you that the need is there. There's no question about it. The key is a matter of pretty much time and skills to adapt the model. So if you guys will be willing to put the time and to put the skills as part of the Fable Consortium to help us downscale a national level model into subnational regions, which is just a more complex model, and that's the reason why it requires more time, you're welcome, definitely. I think we need a lot of that right now.
Thank you, Katia. Yeah, very challenging. Also, the issue of data availability, at lower scales could be like translating from global models to original European models to lower levels is also a bit challenging.
Yes.
But it's interesting that we're going there at YASA. I'm also
Yes, that's a good-
interested. I will reach out later to you.
Yes, exactly. That's a good point. And one of the questions that we always get is, where do we get the data? So the Fable teams, the calculator that you saw there is a general calculator, so you will not see a lot of really like meat in there. But the calculator that the teams get is the same model, but with data and with the relationships between the systems very, very neatly digested. And usually this first version of the model, let's say, uses primarily FAO data and ESA data, which is not perfect, and we acknowledge that. But as Oscar said, it's the best we can do with the data that's available. What we expect from the teams is that then, for example, Jan, if you would be interested in forming a Fable team, it will be up to you guys to then adapt that model with your national level data. And we try to make it easier. So the model has a table where you would just copy paste the data. So it's not as complicated. And that also asks the question for the subnational level. So to form a subnational calculator, you will need to already have the data to copy paste as well.
Okay. Thank you, Katia. Then I think, yeah, I will again encourage everyone to join to this breakout room later on if you're interested to know more. And yeah, hand over to Daniel Zimmer to his presentation. So the floor is yours.
Thank you, Oscar. Trying to share my screen. Tell me if you see when you see
Perfect.
it. Yes. Okay. So, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Daniel Zimmer. I'm working at Climate Kick in a cluster named Climate Neutral and Resilient Regions, so where the P2R project is located. And I've been working on land use, on landscape approaches in the past years, and I will present you some highlights of what we have been doing on forest and value chains. And I would like to basically start with the setting the scene and what are the types of questions that we are asking ourselves, which are very close to what we heard from Katia in the past presentation, which is how do we manage our land to ensure they support economies and societies in the long term? And an important tension is often between what we produce and what we protect. How to find a good balance between these aspects. Of course, we can think of agricultural production versus protecting a number of nature infrastructure. Here, in the case of wood and forest, it's interesting because what is produced is obviously wood, and when you cut wood, you in a way you extract material that has been stored by the forest. So how do you also manage good balance between the protection and particularly the protection of the sink function of the forest and the wood, which is seen more and more as a sustainable material that should be used and substitute other products, particularly carbon-heavy products such as cement, steel, or more generally fuel in general. So what we are also in Climate Kick working a lot on systemic approaches, and we have developed for this a methodology that is presented here. I will not explain it in all details. We'll have the presentation, I assume, after this meeting. But this methodology called the deep demonstration has 4 main steps and is managed with stakeholders in a region, in a country, in a value chain, with the aim of transforming the system that is that is under examination. So these 4 phases are the intent phase, so where basically the state of play, the initial or the baseline situation is examined with the local actors, and where a number of targets and vision for the future is agreed upon. From this, we continue with understanding how the system is working. So it's more the framing stage, where looking at the system and trying to understand how what are the leverage points to transform the systems will be used to design a portfolio of actions. So where is it that the different parts of the system can be transformed, or at least addressed? Where are levers, where are barriers also for the transformation of that system, and what are the different actions that should be implemented for its transformation? This notion of portfolio is extremely important. Just I always give an example. When you want to move from conventional cars to electric cars, you cannot just look at the cars. You need to understand all the infrastructure around the cars, the training of the people, maybe a number of financial instruments to support the transition, etc. So this is the logic of creating a portfolio that is transformative. And then when you have reached an initial portfolio brief, the third stage is about implementing and trying to activate this entire portfolio, which is about getting finance, motivating stakeholders to take action. And then once you have done this, the last step is about observing how the system is behaving, and eventually start, not necessarily from scratch, but at least re-examine the hypothesis and the portfolio and the vision in order to take account of what is observed on the behavior of the system. So it's presented very much as a sort of linear approach, but it's not linear. It's quite an iterative process. So we started this work 4 or 5 years in many countries. We started to work in particular in Scotland, and we had 2 demonstrations that started with 2 different what we call in climate challenge owners, which are the organizations that are leading a transformation in a country. It is very important to identify who are these challenge owners, who is ready to mobilize stakeholders, probably to pay also for some of the activities that will take place. So we worked on 2 topics, one on transforming regional landscapes to make these landscapes carbon sinks while they are often carbon sources. We worked with the Land Commission of Scotland, mobilized a large group of stakeholders of different land uses. We focused on 3 topics. Also, we discovered it was the beginning. It was difficult for us to take, we didn't have the Fable tool basically. And so we needed to start delving into more detailed aspects, also to test our methodology. And so we worked with the forest and wood value chains, looking at this tension between forest and wood, but also considering that from an adaptation perspective, forests and are very much affected currently by the changes in climate. We see in Europe that the carbon sink of the forest has decreased in the past 10 years tremendously by at least 1/3. And so adaptation of the forest is very much at stake at the moment. We worked also on tensions between forest and agriculture because to reach their net zero targets, Scotland wanted to afforest a significant amount of land, and they were conscious that this would create tensions between the forest people and the agriculture sector. And finally, we worked also on peatland rewetting on the largest peatland in Europe, which is called the Flow Country in the north of Scotland. So when we started to develop portfolios of solutions, I will explain a bit more later. And then we had another deep demonstration that was in different regions in Europe. In Scotland, we had a specific case in around Glasgow with the Glasgow city region called Clyde Rebuilt. Clyde is the valley and the river flowing in Glasgow, and there is a big forest also that plays an important role for the resilience of the city of Glasgow, basically because the city faces more and more risk of extreme weather, of floods, and the biodiversity also is decreasing, and the forest integrity is also threatened. So there was this program to recover or at least ensure that the Clyde region will be more resilient. Again, same principles. So these two, we started, I will explain first what we did in the forest and wood sector. We mobilized actors, agreed on a number of transformations. I will not enter into too many details, I don't have the time. And we did a very important work on what I call the system's DNA. What are the key features of a system that make this system difficult to change? The systems, many systems have a number of processes that maintain their stability. And this is very important to understand if we want to transform them. Where will resistance be observed, and what could be the levers to remove the barriers and to get into the expected transformation. I will not go into too many details, but this is just, you will get the link here. You can examine what was done with many stakeholders. This is a systemic map that addresses the issue of connecting better the forests and the wood value chains, developing more long-term carbon storage in wooden buildings in order to benefit also from the carbon function of the forest. Remember this tension between the carbon in the forest and the carbon in the wood. So this has been a very intensive process with many different types of stakeholders that led to this system. I just want to give you one example. If you click on the map here, I'm just here show what I did by clicking just in one of these loops. The loops in systems are a number of interrelated mechanisms that are responsible for the stability of the system. In other words, it can be vicious circles, there can be virtuous circles as well. It means that you can use them to move the system. This one, for instance, and each loop is this little text here is described as a sort of a loop that explains why it is difficult to transform the entire system. And this is, for instance, the legacy of past experience. So in this map is not just a map, it's a description of all the current mechanisms that prevent the transformation. So once we had this very complex map, we did something a bit more simplified and looked at what we call the 3S logic. So we produced a map, it's on the right-hand side, with the main barriers and levers also that could be utilized for the transformation of the system. And here what you see, the 3S logic on the left-hand side, is what we want to achieve. We want to maintain or increase the carbon sink of the forest. We want to maximize the carbon storage in long-term wood products. This is the bioeconomy part. And we want to, as much as possible, substitute fossil carbon-based products with bio-based carbon, wood in this case. So these are the three key functions that we wanted to maximize, and we populate. So these are the yellow boxes on the right. You need a sustainable forest management. You need to ensure that you have sustainable harvest rates to maintain, of course, the sink function. You need to create new value chains because you want indeed to do better with the carbon that you have, and you want to enhance the fossil carbon substitution. So this was later on what we did. We mapped also a number of existing projects, startups, also hubs that existed, that are already looking at all these transformations that would be required to address the different issues identified in the system map. So these are more or less products, and you see, for instance, we had something about market transparency. At the moment, there is a lack of transparency in the wood market. So what can be done? And we identified that there were already some startups able to work on this. So once we had done this, it was at the scale of Scotland. And we faced, actually, to be honest, difficulties to implement it abruptly at the scale of Scotland. But we were very lucky because Glasgow was organizing the COP27 3 years ago. And the Glasgow City region, where we were working already on the resilience aspect, found it very interesting to use all the work that had been done in Scotland in general to also adapt it and try to transform what we had identified in a real portfolio of actions. So this, in fact, it's presented a bit differently, but you see here forest management, raw material processing, and manufacture. It's about the 3S aspect. So you manage the forest better, you ensure you process the wood in order to minimize waste, you specify a number of standards for the construction, you design new value chains or new solutions, you implement them in the construction sector, and you then transform the built environment. It was very interesting that when we developed this portfolio, two important things emerged. We needed first to do a very solid economic analysis of all these solutions, which we did. And so we looked at the benefits, the cost and benefits of these different actions in order to pick the ones that would be the most relevant. And we had also, because we were working with the Glasgow City region, we questioned also the politicians taking the decisions for the region. And it was very interesting to observe that there was a lot of concerns, actually, a lot of concerns about the substitution effect of the wood. Because, of course, if you start substituting cement, steel, and replace it with wood, it's good that you bring in new solutions, but at the same time, you need to transform your sector, and the consequences of changing cement into wood was very much a preoccupation of the politicians, and we needed to go back into the consequences that it would mean for these other sectors. So this, at the moment, we are not very much further than that with this portfolio. We have 4 organizations that are very much motivated. Still, the region, an innovation center, an industry, and an NGO. So it's also the difficulty of these programs. Once you have implemented or at least designed a portfolio of solutions, the difficulty is to move into implementing, getting a number of actors who have been contributing to to the design to really start implementing it. So I would like to give another example very quickly. We also worked on peatland rewetting in the north of Scotland, and this is really a landscape approach that was taken in that case. So when I say landscape approach, it means that the actors who were represented in that case were farmers, rural communities, the tourist sector, but also cultural organizations, the organization promoting Scotland in the tourist sector, and the habitants, the local people. So all these were in that case involved in order to produce a series of actions that could go from creating more woodlands, developing offshore, onshore, offshore wind turbines, etc., etc. What was very interesting in this case is that the investors were part of the process, and from the beginning we received quite some interest for a group of investors to take this holistic transformation and to try to implement it. My final slide is to say that so this is work in progress. We are learning in Climate Kick how to implement these deep demonstration approaches. And what is interesting is that for the carbon and the forest, we are now developing what we call a transformation or transition framework, which is based on a lot of the learnings that I presented before. They look, so the approach is a sort of matrix where we look at the different functions that the carbon needs, and the forest and the wood need to play, so the sink function of the forest, the storage in wood products, etc. And then we create an analysis of the baseline based always on a systemic approach, but we need to look at these different functions and to identify what is the status quo, where also could improvements be feasible. We don't want to look only at ecosystem services, but very much as the economic roles of in that case, the forest and the wood. And from this baseline, we want to develop our portfolio of actions. And for this, we have an entire set of possible technical and innovative solutions that we have now identified, but we could do it, of course, in other systems. We need to move into economic and business models for these solutions, and from this, develop the real systemic transformation portfolios, which will go into policies, technologies, capacity building, standards, etc., carbon markets. So this is now a methodology that we are putting in place for the forest and wood sector. But in principle, the same matrix could be used also, if we wanted to work in a landscape, looking at agriculture versus forest versus peatland rewetting or whatever, this is really where we want to go now and to test this type of approach that we have been developing in other regions, in other places in Europe, if possible, maybe with some of you. And so these methods can be adapted to your specific issues. This is my conclusion. And I thank you very much for your attention.
Thanks a lot, Daniel, for the presentation. Sylvia, do we take a few questions now or do we go to breakout rooms?
We can take a few questions now. If there's any, then we can move to the next part.
Maybe a question from me, Daniel. How do you integrate projections or trends in terms of changing climate that can affect all the parts of the forest value chain in that system mapping?
Of course, then it's the adaptation of the forest and the evolution of the sink function is a very important element. So what are the trees that show difficulties to adapt? What new trees could be utilized, but also what management of the forest in Scotland, as in many countries in Europe, there is a debate between people proposing to move classical management with clear cuts. So you basically take a forest and you cut it clear every 50, 60 years, and then you take another forest, etc., etc. And now more and more countries and people move into continuous cover approaches. So instead of cutting clear your forest plots, basically you prune or you select the trees that have the potential to grow, and you move from copies. So basically a forest with a lot of trees, if we are not in a plantation, to select the trees that will be mostly adapted to the future climate, and also use them to reduce the number of trees, because in general there is an increasing the amount of total carbon that can be stored in a forest increases to a certain level. So when you decrease the number of trees, so if you start with a high density of trunks, the maximum storage of carbon that you can reach is lower than what you can get if you reduce it by half or whatever. So there are a lot of management aspects that can be also utilized to adapt the forest to the future climate. And we are working in projects in Europe also to use, so we will not be able to avoid forests to be threatened by more storms, more wildfires, more pests. And so we are working also in projects where wood that has been affected by pests, or by wildfire even, could be used in long-term products. So there are a lot of innovative solutions that are being developed at the moment to ensure that our forests will keep their enormous sink capacity. And we see here, sorry to speak again, that mitigation and adaptation in the case of forests are really the two faces of a similar coin.
Thank you, Daniel. Sorry, I was trying to unmute myself. It took a few seconds. Thank you, Daniel. Thank you, Katya, for your presentation, and Ron, Oscar, for facilitating the Q&A. We're moving to the next step of today's session, where you will have the possibility to deep dive a bit further within the two tools that have been presented. The way we're going to do this today is that we're going to create two rooms, and it's going to be up to you to decide where you want to go. The rooms, since we're a bit out of time, are going to last for 25 minutes. When we're going to be midway, we're going to jump into the room to mention you that we're midway, so you can decide if you want to stay in the same room or if you want to move to a new room. I'm going to open the room now, and facilitator will be automatically redirected there. And I'm going to explain you how to find your room and your way. So now that facilitators are moving to the room, you all should have on the bottom part of your screen, where you do have like your microphone, camera, and all the rest, a new box popping up called breakout rooms. Or if you cannot see, there are 3 dots where when you can read more, and you can click in the more part, and you will find breakout room. And when you open breakout room, you can see that there are 2 rooms available, one called Fable and one called Landscape, and the join blue button close to it. And you can decide which room you would like to join. And if you don't know how to do that, but you know where would you like to go, just turn off the mic and we're gonna move you directly to the room. I see that someone has started moving around. Welcome back, everybody. I think we're now all back in the plenary. So how was the conversation breakout? I'm gonna give you minutes to each room, just to quickly share with the other room what you have been talking about and how are the conversation going in your room. So we'll start with the Fable room.
Yes, should I report or should some of you, does anybody in the room want to report? Otherwise, I can do it.
You
Okay,
can talk, you can talk.
Exception. Okay, so thank you, Humberto and Rita, for joining the Fable room. We were discussing mostly, Rita and Humberto mentioned many problems relating to food and agricultural systems in Portugal. Namely a massive change of crops that were traditionally planted, like cork, I know that for sure, but also olive trees, going more into this investment for profit, cash crops from that other countries that use the land of Portugal mostly to get profit out of them, and not really caring for the needs of Portugal itself. This is like in a nutshell, a lot of what the problems were pointed to. And we were then going into the direction of whether the Fable tool could be a good tool to study these problems. And I guess the answer is yes and no. So yes, because it is a problem of planning. I asked Rita and Humberto if this was more of a territorial planning or ordering, and the answer was yes. So this lack of where does the country want to go using its soil and its land? What do we want to put where, and what implications that has for sustainability? That seems to be a little bit the problem, and Fable can help with that. Fable doesn't have especially explicit tools right now. This can be added. It just requires more adaptation, which seems to be the case because crops are olive trees cannot just be put anywhere, no, as well as cash crops. So the especially explicit aspect makes a lot of sense here. So Fable plus especially explicit tool could help. Yeah, that's, I think, in a nutshell what I got. But Rita and Humberto and Oscar, if you guys want to add something else, please feel free.
I just wanted to thank Rita and Humberto for joining the room and the discussion, and just sent in the chat, like we would like to reach out to you separately to discuss more about the Beja region and the potential applicability, like to explore the potential applicability together of the Fable tool for this specific situation. It sounds very interesting and very related to the relevant to the tool. So yeah, thank you. Looking forward to discussing more about it.
Rita, Humberto, do you have something to add?
No, that's it. It is the problem in Portugal and probably the problem in other countries. The use of extensive exploration of the land.
For sure, without a question. Okay, thank you, Oscar, Rita, and Humberto, and back to you.
Thank you so much. Thanks a lot. And I pass over to room number 2. I don't know who would like to share a little bit.
Lorraine, you took notes, so
Yeah.
maybe you have a...
I can share a quick summary. There was a lot of sharing of different experiences and different questions from several regions in France, in Italy, in Slovakia. So I give you a few snippets of that. We discussed, for example, around the topic of landscapes and forests, how to fund, how to support forest protection, especially in contexts where they are when forest ownership is quite fragmented. And for example, in regions we have private owners that each own very small portions of forest areas. So that can be a challenge to have an integrated approach. We also talked about not only forest, but how it interacts, how in the landscapes you have interactions between different types of land use, between agriculture, how you can integrate trees, for example, under the shape of hedges, and how that can be supported by policy, taking into account different trade-offs that could influence farmer taking action on that. There were some questions also regarding what stakeholders to involve in that type of project and what are their motivations, including around who funds this type of actions between impact investors, value chain actors, or for example, investors that are interested in carbon credit systems. We talked about some new value chains that are sometimes needed to support landscape restorations, such as in the case of peatlands and paludiculture. And also an example from Italy, where the historical approach to landscape is very important, for example, with olive trees, vineyards, and the question is how to develop and support maximum benefits from this type of ecosystems, taking into account the long-term investments of stakeholders in those cultures and changes in climate that could require some sacrifices or contributions from them. So yeah, lots of interesting ideas and questions, and I think there is a lot of potential to continue these discussions and to support each other across the regions.
Thank you so much. Thanks a lot. And talking about like how to further explore this, I would like to invite you all also to share in the chat, and then we're going to take the time to move this into our mirror space. If there are any particular topics that you would like to further explore about the land use and food system in future innovation practice group session, this can be helpful for us to understand how to plan the next round. So 2 things. First, if you have any particular topic you would like us to further explore, calling in other experts, or if you would like to volunteer as an expert, or if you would like to volunteer with a particular case study of something that is happening in your region that can be interesting for us to listen about. And it is that you can come to the room next time, present your case study. We can still call like experts in the room that can give you like feedback, or give you like, we can have an exchange of idea about this and all of that. So In the chat, you can find a link to an expression, not an expression of interest, sorry. Yeah, an expression of interest to present a case study, let's say. So it's more kind of a form where you're invited to just insert like your data and information about what you would like to present. And I just invite you to go there and to type what you would like to present in the form. And if there's nothing you would like to present, but you would like to listen about from expert, please just type in the chat what are the topic you think could be more relevant for you. And while you're thinking and reflecting about that, I'm also launching a feedback form that is popping up on your screen. I know that some of you have been participating in many innovation practice groups, so have seen like this form popping up at the end of each session. It's quite easy. There's just few questions, and most of the questions are just like likers. You need just to tell us how much have been satisfied or not satisfied with what we have been presenting here. It's more to have a sense of how you have been experiencing this session, to understand what we can do better and how we can reframe like the activities for the next session. So I will leave like this form in front of you for a few minutes, so you can just quickly go through it. It seems long, but I promise it's not. It takes like 1 or 2 minutes max to fill it in. And it's just very useful for us to have this overview. And then before leaving, I will share with you another 2 quick information.
And I would like to encourage you to put there in the chat a specific topic for further sessions, something that is burning in your region, in your work related to land use and food systems. So feel free to put there, and we will consider it for next sessions. It will be very helpful for us to design the next sessions about which topics we should frame it. Yeah.
I also want to share with you quickly my screen before closing. I see that people are still filling in the form. So a few important information of how to navigate with Miraboard that, as we said, is going to stay open for you. So please save the link. We're also going to share again the link in the chat, so you can just save this link on your laptop. One thing is that here is where we would like to collect these kind of future topics that we can explore, as Oscar was mentioning. So if today there's nothing coming up on your mind, but next week there's going to be something that you say, oh, probably we can discuss about this, just feel free to come back to this mirror board and to grab a post-it and put your topic in the post-it here. So we're gonna have a look at it before setting up the next session. One more thing I want to share is that here in the tools part, you can now find the links that have been shared through the session. So there's a link to Fable. You just need to click on this bottom here, source, which is bringing you to the related page. And the same for the wooden construction system map shared by Daniel. So you click on the topic, you click on this small arrow, it's going to bring you like to the related page. So we're going to have everything in one place. We're also going to add the presentation here, where now we have those yellow post-its, so you will have access to that as well. And last but not least, on the top of this page, you have 2 agenda boxes. One is for the week 1. We're now here, so we're more than halfway through the IPGs week, but we have 2 days to go. So if you would like to register in one of those sessions, you just can come to the Miro and click on the registration link here and register yourself to the next session. And on the second part about week 2, we do not have the registration links yet, but just want to mention that the land use and food system next session is going to be Wednesday, the 4th of June in the morning. So just save the date for now. And we're going to give you access to the registration link as soon as possible. Thank you, everybody. Thanks a lot, Daniel. Thanks a lot, Katia, for being here with us today. Very insightful. And thanks, Loren and Oscar, for hosting us. Thank you so much.
Yes.
Have a lovely evening.
Thanks.
Thank
Bye,
you. It
everyone.
was nice.
Bye.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you all.
Bye.
Bye-bye.